Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Greyhawk Landing Community Development District. Today is Thursday, April 26, 2018. The time now is 6:05 p.m. We are located at the Greyhawk Landing Clubhouse at 12350 Mulberry Avenue, Bradenton, Florida 34212. Present and constituting quorum, we have Jeffrey Evans, our chairman. Here. Ollie Kite, assistant secretary. Here. Tony Francis, assistant secretary. Here. Dennis Smith, assistant secretary.
Here.
We have audience members present this evening. We have Michael Playa, our vice chair, present via phone. Andy Cohen, our district counsel. Rick Shopker, district engineer. We have myself, Grant Phillips, representing district management with Rosetta & Company. We have Ed Morrow, our field manager. Dean Packwitt from Kinley Horn, the developer's engineer, and John McNeil with Aquagenics. Before we rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, can we please have a motion to allow for Mr. Playa to participate via phone? We have a motion from Ollie, second from Tony. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. If we could all please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Audience members, the first item on the agenda is audience comments. Keep in mind, 3 minutes to address the board up front at the podium. The first comment card is Walter Wolsak.
Red light on?
UNOSF button.
Hello?
Okay. First, I have a question. If we submit things to the CDD emails, like a few things I did, is it already in, like you say, the agenda or something, or do we have to rehash it here at the podium?
Typically, when a resident submits a request to be placed on the agenda, I run it by the board members, and then typically the chair or the vice chair indicates whether they would like for that topic to be on the agenda. If nothing's received, then you can readdress the topic as you're doing now during the audience comment portion.
Okay, well, just to be sure, one of the things I submitted via email was with regards to the vandalism by the basketball courts, a suggestion that a number of people had that play tennis and pickleball was to turn off the lights at the basketball and tennis courts at some designated time. That time would most likely be 11 o'clock because you're locking up the bathroom lights there, bathroom doors. So why not turn off the lights so that people aren't playing tennis at 1 o'clock or basketball at 1 o'clock in the morning? This suggestion, Carlene said, was brought up about a year or so ago, and then it fell through the cracks. The neighbors were complaining about the lights. So that's one item. Second is, I'm sure, received a whole slew of emails from a lot of people about the resurfacing of the courts, including from at least one individual who was in the business of resurfacing courts. He worked for a paving company, and none of us believe that it's time to do the courts. Third, about the roundabout, in all the meetings I've gone to, nobody here seemed to have told us all that much about the roundabouts. Like we were misled here into thinking that the traffic light for Greyhawk Boulevard was going to be some outrageous cost. And
No,
so,
there was never a discussion of cost. What was discussed as a result of the FDOT's conversation with us and others representing the community was they told us what their schedule was. Okay? And so that's what we shared with the community. And I know Tony has that on his records.
well, in any case, going to the FDOT and going to the hearing that was over at Bayside, we find out that they had like a 100-page study done in which, in their study, even though if you Google it, it says traffic lights should cost $100,000. They say it's going to be $330,000 in their document, and yet they want to put in a roundabout for $3.6 million. So
All right,
we,
well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have spoke because it misled you into thinking we were having a dialogue.
no, I'm just trying
Because
to
that's
finish
an item on the agenda,
about the intersection.
about the FDOT and the whole State Road 64 corridor.
Okay. I sent a whole lot of information about that, including all the inaccuracies in the FDOT report, and there's possibly fraud going on at FDOT for the amount of money they're looking at spending. I sent all that to Dennis, so I'm assuming that you may have passed it along.
I read it.
Okay. I've got more information about that since then, including what the federal government says about roundabouts and how it doesn't address ADA issues, et cetera. So if we have people trying to cross here, there's no crosswalk anywhere.
And sir, we're going to, like Jeff mentioned, we're going to discuss this in today's agenda, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Next up, we have Steve Haynes.
Yeah, this is, I'd just like to reiterate about the midge infestation on Rosemary, and I know it seems like they're trying something different because what was working before wasn't working.
We'll
so-
be addressing that as soon as we finish this.
Thank you.
That's why this whole row of engineers are here.
Dennis Zawak.
Okay. I also want to talk about the midge flies, and we know we tried many different things. Nothing seems to be working so far. I don't know what it costs every time we try something and it doesn't work, what kind of expense that is, or we're wasting our money. I just wish we could come up with something that would work, for, definitely. My house, when I have people come over, I tell them to come in through the garage. They can't even come in the front door because they seem it's in that little entranceway. There's millions of. If you open your mouth, you just get a mouthful, So I open the garage door and I say, "Hurry up, run in." And also, I bought property, paid extra for a lake view. When I look at my lanai in the morning, I see bugs. They're just all over the screen, and it's really, blocking my view, so to speak. But, I just hope we can come up with something that's going to work and be done.
That's very definitely our interest, is to pursue a solution.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ken Crutis.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I don't want to reiterate what you heard already, but I do have some things I'd like to talk about. I know that you all been working real hard on trying to get these midges taken care of. I know that because I was in the meeting a year ago where we talked about how you're going to do this, and there was a plan. And the only problem is that they still exist, and not only do they exist, they're spreading. I thought it was just our lake. It's also now the lake across from me, and a lake in the new section with the smaller lots are getting them. I know that for a fact because I was just there. Okay, the other thing I'd like to say is that there are times when I can't even get out of my house. I go to the front door, and they're completely taking over my front foyer. Then I go to the garage, and if I open the garage door, they are all over the garage door, and therefore they're all over my garage. I go to my car, I open it up, yes, I open it up, and they're in my car. These midges, I hate these midges when I bought this property or this house, okay? I really don't want. See, it doesn't only affect me and my neighbors, you've heard a couple of them. It affects all of us because it's going to be your property value. Ironically, the house next door just sold. It was a good day when they came. The midges were low level. The day after, they were back, and people said, we didn't know you had that many bugs. Oh, it's seasonal. That was the crap we got a year ago. In the winter, they'll go away. Well, They didn't go away. So my pool area, I have not used my pool, honest to God, since I moved in the house a year ago. I couldn't. When they get in the screen, and we looked for all areas where they get in, they're floating on the top of the pool. So we even took the furniture off the pool deck. So now I have a house that we can live in the inside. You can't go outside. You can't use the pool. Every couple of days, it improves. A few of the midges go away. When it's real windy, or right when it rains, it's good. It gets better. Then they come back like crazy. When the pool, let's talk about the lake. The lake is sprayed irregularly. I understood from some of the meetings that there's like a 10-day cycle where these things live and then they die. But they lay eggs. You want to get that? Is that you? All right. A 10-day cycle. Well, wouldn't you think that you should spray it, and then 10 days later spray it again, and then 10 days later, and then you'll be finished? When you go 3 months, as it was a couple of times, they lay their eggs again, and they have generations after. So if you're going to do that, please tell whoever's spraying that be consistent. Now, putting the fish in the pond is a great idea, and I think that's a good idea, really. The only thing is, they get eaten. The birds come down, and we had, what do you call those, pelicans? Well, 100 pelicans on the lake the other day. Where are the fish? They're gone. Okay? Whatever you do, please do it consistently. But I'm not saying you haven't tried. You just failed. Let's be honest. All right. Whatever you do. Oh, one thing, you might try birds. Maybe we can get some birds that eat these things. Because fish didn't work, spraying didn't work. Bring more birds in. Maybe they eat these things. Guys, you've got to start thinking creatively. It's been over a year.
And sir, we're going to discuss this in detail with our
In
actual
detail,
vendor.
okay.
So,
Well, I'm just a little worried about property value. I'm worried about conditions of living here. And I got the same blank faces that I got a year ago. Thank you.
next up we have Richard Doff, 659 Rosemary Circle.
Thanks. Richard Neff. I'm neighbors with Ken and Dennis, who just spoke. The midge problem is very real. I lived on a lake in Lakewood Ranch for a couple of years. Not a midge, never knew there was a midge. My wife grew up in Venice, no midges, it's not just Florida, no midges. So it's a problem, it's a real problem, as you've heard, and it needs to be solved. So take seriously finding the solution. Part B, light pollution. We have, throughout the neighborhood, very high Kelvin white lights for our street lights. They're almost blinding when you're walking in the evening. It would be easy to baffle these lights, make it a beautiful environment. Walking the sidewalks, light baffled onto the sidewalks and dappling the front lawns, and it wouldn't take that much work. So I think that'd be a nice thing to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Charles Dine.
Thank you. I'll try to be short. One is on the midges, and I don't know if you've been treating Lake 10 or not. I know you're treating Lake 7, which seems to be your test lake, but 10 evidently has been ignored, which is surrounded by Chantilly and Rosemary Circle. So you might want to put that into your list of lakes to attend to. And the second thing is the tennis courts. I and a number of the tennis players in the neighborhood feel that that is a total waste of money at this time because the courts are in excellent condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jack Rinaldi.
Evening. It was about a year ago. Oh, you want? You can't hear me? Sorry. It was, 2 years ago we moved into this neighborhood. And again, I'm up here to talk about the midge fly. And I've been one of the people that's worked very close with Mike Pelaya, who's on the phone, to try to resolve the issue. And I know you guys have tried a lot of things. The littorals, the larvae eating fish, we've done spraying, we've tried to control the algae. Unfortunately, it's been a very limited effect on what's been going on in the ponds. So lately, this last treatment a week ago tomorrow was to put a pellet in the pond number 7, which is a insect growth restrictor that's been put in. It's a pellet that got spread around the perimeter of the pond. It'll disseminate for about 30 days to try to help control or reduce the amount of midge larvae. And it's been written up by the University of Florida as a recommended method to kind of control it. That's been, these methods don't seem to be quite working as the rest of the people who have gotten up and spoke. One of the things I've asked, and I don't know if anybody has taken the opportunity to do so, is I've asked through an email that any individual board member to please come out and witness what's going on at our houses. And I don't believe very many, if any, have really come out, seen the infestation, and experienced in a very short window what we experience every day. And I know we have issues with landscaping, irrigation, exercise equipment, the roundabout, all those issues, but the only one that is a true quality of life issue for this Greyhawk West is the midge infestation. It truly is. We deal with it every day, 7 days a week, 12 months out of the year. The seasonal dissertation that I also got when I bought the house was that the midges are seasonal. Nobody told the midges. They don't go away. They're there every day. So please, guys, I commend you for what you have done, but please don't stop. We got to find a solution. If you need to get a aquatics expert in here to try to solve the problem and understand why these ponds are doing what they're doing, please do. Don't stop. We're making progress, but it's very slow. So thank you. And again, I extend a personal invitation. My house is open. If you have my address on the card, please stop by. I'll show you. But come in the morning. That's when they're the most intense. And then they disseminate during the day, but they're back the next. Thank you.
Thank you. Next card is Lindsay Rushmore.
Good evening. I would like to thank Ed and Grant for forwarding me some contract documents with regards to our community. I'm sure you're all aware, Allied Security has been going month to month for 4 years. That's not okay, especially considering they're neglecting 25% of their job duties. Not a single time that I drove through the front gate today did they ask or record any information. 2 of your residents have been victims of crime in the last 2 weeks. A child was nearly abducted. When people are in a panic situation, they don't always look at tag numbers, but they will always remember the vehicle that was involved. Had we been collecting information at the gate, a potential child abduction could have been prevented. It wasn't because they don't do their job. Another resident was assaulted during the yard sale. My child was there. My child witnessed it. It's not okay. You pay $200,000+ a year, which is 20% of our budget, and they're not made to do their job. I won't put up with it anymore. 3 of you are up for re-election. I will replace you, and I will make sure it's taken care of. You guys can do it, or I'll do it. You have till November. End of story. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Lindsay Wilson.
I don't quite know how to follow that. After the success at the block party from the events group, I'm asking tonight if it would be okay for us to close, or for you to close the pool for our Memorial Day event that's coming up the end of May. Also, the closet just over there, we found that when the clubhouse is being rented out, people are going into our boxes of equipment, helping themselves, leaving it down on top of the chairs. So I was wondering if we could, or I could, make signs saying Greyhawk Landing Events Group, private property, please do not touch. We also have a resident in the community who has put forward an idea to have a car show. So we're hoping that you would okay it for us to add it onto one of our events for this upcoming year. As soon as we actually know which event it will be added onto, we will let you know. He's talking about putting it in the parking lot, so we would cordon off the parking lot, make it into a car show for people to look around. Thank you.
Lindsay, let us know as soon as you have more details.
Okay, thanks.
Okay?
Is there locks on that door?
Yeah.
No, because they used the
And there were signs in there at one point in time, because I've seen
tables
signs.
and everything.
Well, I understand, but there were signs.
Thank you. The last audience comment card I received was Christina Courtenay.
Good evening. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I just want to bring to your attention that the midge problem is also off like Fig Glen and Goldenrod area. We're starting to see more midges over there as well. And my lanai is starting to be covered with them as well. I also have family on Rosemary, and I can tell you that the problem is getting progressively worse there. Something needs to be done. I did speak to my bug guy person, if you want to call it. They said that the problem could be solved with aeration. They've seen it be solved with aeration in other communities, so I really think that that's something that should be taken into account and looked at seriously. I also want to let you know that there was an issue with security last week regarding, I was the one that helped out with a child that was possibly being not abducted, but like there was someone that was soliciting and came up and was approaching a child, and I intervened. So I think security needs to be looked at as well, and I just wanted to bring both of those to your attention. Something needs to be done, especially with how much we're paying for security. There shouldn't be things like that happening in this community, not with how many children we have here. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That concludes the audience comment portion of today's agenda, which means we will... One more? The question was, would you permit the pool to be closed for Memorial Day?
We have the big barbecue. We have the big barbecue, and we're doing the big roast that day. But we're doing a...
Which pool? This one?
We're doing a ticket, yeah, the tickets are $5 per family, and that's to cover the actual pig roast. So we want to be able to control what comes in. We're going to use the pool for that. Remember we talked about that we're in the pool and some other pool games. So we wanted to know if that was okay. Not just really close to the residents, and hopefully they'll come. You know what I'm saying? But more the fact that they...
But will the pool be...
Pool's going to be open.
Yeah, okay, so it will be used, that's the intent. So how would it be closed then?
Well, what we need is we want to be able to, we don't want people to, because we're doing a $5 ticket sale per family.
Okay.
So now you have more than one, $5 ticket and a $4 pig roast.
Okay, so if you participate in the event, then you can use the pool.
But if you don't...
Is that something we can do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah?
All right. Is the other pool going to be open at that, by...
The rec center.
I'm sorry to be pessimistic, but that spray and spray has been a thorn in our side for years. But you expect the other pool to be available for non-participants. Okay. I'll make the motion then.
So motion to allow for the Memorial Day event for the events group to take place at the clubhouse pool. That was a motion from Jeff, a second from Tony. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Okay.
And one other question. The pig roast, I know it has to be so much far away from the building. You did it right there in the front part where the grass is, on the grass, in the right corner there, is that okay?
I'll defer to Ed on that. He can give you guidance on
Where to set it up.
where to set up. Is that okay, Ed? Give him. That wasn't a happy face.
Tell them where to.
Unless one of you has a lot more expertise on this topic than I. Oh, yeah,
I have
cooking
an
dinners.
extensive background in it, but I will not say.
You're not going to continue, okay. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
so,
So we'll work with staff and we'll make sure everything's taken care of for that Memorial Day event. This will conclude the audience comment portion of today's agenda. Audience members, so we'll move ahead to staff reports. The first being the aquatics update. You have the Greyhawk Landing West.
can we go to the Midge part of the aquatics update?
We can do that right up front. And
Do
we
that-
do have John
do that
McNeil
first.
with Aquagenics here as well, who's our contracted aquatics vendors also. So, and I know that Ollie had some items as well.
Okay, thank you, guys. John from Aquagenics. The midges seem to be a serious...
Actually, if you want, maybe, let John use the podium, because then everyone can hear him.
Okay, John from Aquagenics. The midges have been an issue here for approximately a year, maybe a little bit longer. We have some data here, and Ollie has a package that...
Interrupt John. I don't know how many of you have actually taken the time to go on the website and look up midges in Manatee County. Okay, I printed it out. Okay, there's two things here that's very important. Number one is, it says all things considered, the most effective measures against midges are the ones that the homeowners can do themselves, and list a number of things. The other thing is control of midges has been very ineffective. Nearly all attempts to control have yielded poor results, at best because of the types of habitat they breed in and their habits are when they're adults. The problems with larvae control are that, in general, the larvae size available are relatively ineffective against midges. Take this, I ask just one per household. Take it, when you get home, read it, look at it, listen to what John has to say. I've lived here for 12 years. I moved in 2006. I've lived with the midge problem too. When I read about it, I did this. I go out and I spray my lawn with water. I do the same thing with my pool cage. My wife, when she goes to work, I get up earlier and go out and do it. Yeah, it's a hassle, but guess what? It works. It controls them a little bit.
So what we do is we determine the type of pest that we have there. So we've identified the type of midge. University of Florida has a lot of technical data on there. And so what we've done is we've set up a practice plan for that. And there's like 4 different stages of the treatment for the midges. Stage number 1 is obviously to identify and do as much as possible throughout the community to minimize the light sources, things of that sort. No nutrients, a lot of things get introduced into the water. So then we go on to step number 2. The second strategy involves fish. So we've gone and Mike Playa has, between us and Mike Playa, we've consulted and put a fair amount of fish in there. But then we do the biological control. We're using a product called Vectorbax 12AS. It's kind of a greener way to go. And let me go back a step. The CDDs had very little out-of-pocket expense for this. Richard Rogers from Sam Rogers Homes has been very active and very supportive in the finance of the midge treatments. So we go and we put in the biological control for the midges, and it seems to work periodically here and there. Unfortunately, midges, the history of midges normally are in older ponds that have an awful lot of sediment in the bottom of them. These new ponds are relatively new. They're only a few years old. There's not an awful lot of biomass in the bottom of them. So it's a little bit out of a characteristic for midges to be that strong in a newer pond. Normally, they're stronger in older ponds. So then we go into the third strategy. I mean, there's other types of people. You could put up light traps on the backside on the wetland areas. But anyways, we've come down to the fourth strategy of the best management practice plan. So now we are using the growth inhibitors. The first treatment was done in pond number 7 last week. It's a granular product. It's spread approximately 20 feet off the shoreline around the full perimeter of the pond. Most costly application. The Miapreme is very, very expensive. It's anywhere roughly $400 per acre for treatment at the maximum label rate. We get a label rate from the manufacturer that's approved by EPA to we can use a minimum amount or a maximum amount. So we've gone to the maximum amount and treated pond number 7.
John, how big are these ponds? I don't know how big an acre is as far as...
Pond number 7 is roughly 3.5 acres. So that was kind of our prototype lake. These other lakes, lake number 10 is much larger. It's probably 7 or 8 acres. I have to get the data over there. I don't exactly know. But pond number 7 is roughly 3.5. So that was $1,400 for that treatment. I was on site yesterday, and I walked the perimeter of that pond, and I didn't see any midges. Now, I know that there may be days where they're stronger than others, but you cannot treat every 10 days. Label rate is a maximum of once every 30 days. That's the maximum you can do. We cannot put that chemical in the water every week, every 2 weeks, every 10 days, or anything like that. The most we can do is once a month for the label rate. Unfortunately, we have no other option but to follow the letter of the law. The label rate on the chemical is what we have to go by. There is no way that we can add additional treatments or do it more often or do more chemical. It's just unethical. We can't do it. We'd be putting our neck and reputation on the line and our license on the line. So there's only so many ounces per pounds of this material per acre. Now there are other things. Aeration was mentioned earlier. Aeration is an option, but I've also been in the business long enough where aeration wasn't the answer. There are some instances where it did help, but there are other instances where aeration was put in and it didn't help at all. We did a dissolved oxygen test in pond number 7, and we got 9 parts per million. 10 is perfect, 0 is obviously not good at all. So there's a lot of oxygen in the water for the fish to survive in. So probably would, yes?
John, could I just say something here?
Yeah, Mike.
If we had oxygen problems, we'd have more fish kills than we do. So I think in general, not that you can't have a temporary oxygen problem, but it seems that oxygen is not our problem here.
Yeah, they say to add oxygen to the water to increase the fish, the oxygen for the fish to live to eat the larvae. The oxygen itself, I mean, the oxygen added to the water is going to move a little bit of the water around, but they nest in the mud, in the muck. So I'm hopeful that the continuation of these treatments with the growth inhibitors would be the answer. But there is no way to ever eliminate them 100%. And you would not want to do that. They're part of the ecosystem. They're part of the food chain. They need to be there to a certain degree. Do we want to try to control them? Absolutely. But you are not ever going to totally get rid of them all to extinction.
Just let me, I'm sorry to interrupt you, John, but just want to make sure we all understand that this is not something we're disinterested in. This is a priority.
Absolutely.
One of the people who spoke, I think Jack said, this is probably our top priority in terms of problems to solve. We've got a bunch of issues and different people have different problems in different parts of the community, have different experiences, but I think this one has been with us long enough and is severe enough that it warrants our full attention. And so that's why we asked Rick to be here tonight, to participate in this conversation, and also Sam Rogers.
And we've done other treatments in other ponds throughout the community, and it's been successful with the bio, the lavi. It's been successful. Why this side gives us such a hard time, I really wish I had a definitive answer, but I do not.
So what I'd like to request, and hopefully this isn't a problem, is to put together a written kind of white paper on this. Not big voluminous thing, just what is the scope of the problem? What are the ponds affected? What are the ditches? What is the lots or the parts of the community that are affected by this now? What is the treatment plan? And if you all have recommendations on this, or I'd like you to step in and participate in looking at what John and Mike are doing, and Ed, and if you have thoughts or recommendations on this, I'd like you to provide them. So this can be something that we put on the website so that every resident, whether they are directly affected or a friend of theirs is affected, or that they are in the middle, ground zero of this problem, that they can see what is the story and what is the plan and what is the impact or the success or not of the plan. And so this is not going to go away because we want it to, but hopefully it'll diminish because of the action that you all are taking. But I'd like to make the communication process a lot more vigorous as it relates to this issue. And as far as the expenditure, you mentioned Richard Rogers. The community and Richard are also in sync on this. We are committed to address this problem and to spend the money that will be effective in treating the problem. So we're not going to throw money at this with the hope that by spending $50,000, that'll make it go away. But if it needs to be funded, we will make sure that funding is available.
Can I also ask you, John, to make sure you include in your report aeration, the costs of aeration, the types of aeration, solar versus regular electric, and what, if those are solutions, we need to have that information also.
Yeah, that's all there for the technical data. And
the cost is outrageous.
yeah, I mean, I have done some calculations
feedback on
for that.
And that is not our problem. Aeration is not the solution. You don't have a problem with the oxygen.
Yeah, the aeration, I have done a calculation in the past for the aeration. It is, can be extremely costly.
Okay, well, as Denny requested, just incorporate that. And Rick, if you would help, John, do this, I think it's a priority that we get this information together, get it out to the community, but at the same time, do the work that you've all talked about doing.
Yeah,
and Mike, go get more fish. The pelicans are gone. The migratory period's over.
Our fish will be stocked in the last week of May with the emphasis on frog-eating fish.
Okay. If there's any way to accelerate that, please do.
We have thousands of fish coming, and then for the new ponds that we may take over, I've asked Grant to include in the new budget extra money for Great Hawk West for plants. Ed is going to get the mosquito fish and put them in those 7 new ponds. And then in October, I've got a commitment from the fish guy for $1,000 worth of bug-eating fish for them and plants, which gives the protection to the bug-eating plants, fish rather, so they can survive and breed before the white pelicans get here.
Yeah, on the fall trip.
We haven't had an increase in for the stockings and for the plants in probably 5-6 years. So I'm asking for another $3,000 in the budget, most of which would go to the new ponds in Great Hawk West.
So as I said, the money is there. You know, the board has the discretion to spend well more than that on a particular problem, as long as you all are in agreement that we should do that.
And it's also, and Mike can comment on this, you mentioned stocking of fish. Fish are only available certain times of the year because in the summertime, the mortality rates are really high in the transfer. And so that's, we can't go out and buy 10,000 fish and put them in the pond as an example today. John can attest to that. There's only certain times when we are assured that the fish will survive and they will reproduce.
Okay.
Yeah, so I locked in like $1,000 at the right price for October, because I'm sure that this board is going to go along with that to make sure that we get a head start with these ponds at Great Hawk West. Now, there's one other thing about the midge control before, I don't want to cut John off, but I've been in contact with our mosquito control company that does our system over at the clubhouse. Now, they do have the same system for residential houses. Now, that again is not 100%. And what it does is it controls the ones that aren't killed in the pond. It kills them at the residential. For the people, I've heard that people don't want to spray the hose, use the hose to wipe them down off the cage. They don't want to spray, with pesticides or whatever, which is they have systems for the house at a actually fairly reasonable price. And I'm negotiating right now a discount for any resident that wants to do that. And if this board wants them to come and do like a real quick 10-15 minute presentation at the next meeting, I can work that out. And gives the residents a choice of, because no matter how good we do, there's still going to be a bunch of niches around. As there is, we have good mosquito control, but we still have mosquitoes. So, but this will give some of the residents, especially where they have a major problem, a choice on another solution. But I asked the board to take a vote to see if you want EX to come in and do a presentation.
We don't really need a vote. I mean, it would be board direction, but certainly if you want to discuss it.
Any need to, I don't see any harm.
No harm.
Okay. Yeah, bring him in as soon as possible, Mike.
On to the next meeting.
Okay.
John?
And residents do not have to negotiate. I will get whether he gets one customer or 20 customers, it will be a wholesale discount. This company's been really good with us for the clubhouse. It's improved. The mosquito problem was improved, I would say, 80-85%. You still have mosquitoes, but it's much, much better than it was a couple of years ago. I would ask the event committee, Lindsay or anybody else who was the ones that asked to see if we could do something, and I think they would agree that it got a lot better.
All right, can John continue?
Well, Mike, one question. What was the name of the company?
I think it's INIKS. It's got the phone number to the contact. Who's the router?
Yeah, ANIC.
And they will do for the house, they can do like the cage, all around the cage. And then once they put the pump in, which I think is the biggest expense, they can also do the front entrance of your house, but not that much more because the pump is the biggest expense.
Well, when he does the presentation,
And the little EPA approved, like the one that we have in the clubhouse, the pesticide is made from chrysanthemums. So it's very safe. Now for the midges or whatever, it's got to be a little bit stronger. So I'm not sure. It's still EPA approved. I'm not exactly sure what the chemical is. But they do a great job. They work really good with us. And I think we can work out a good deal. Because of course they're looking for business, but it would be something that I believe that residential systems run anywhere from $300 to $4,500. That's the general cost of those. So, but anyway, we can get them in, and I'll work out the negotiations on a price, and then if anybody's interested, they can contact them direct at that meeting.
Thank you, Mike. John, will you have anything else for the board on this topic before we move on to some other topics?
No, nothing. Do you gentlemen have any observations since you took the time to
We've been involved in communities a long time and issues, and they bring them as best as they can.
Okay. But I would like you, Rick, to allocate some time to participate in this, if you would.
Yeah, I'll follow up with John, and then we'll
And then
see
you
what we can do with it. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
I have a comment. John, can you prepare your white paper? Could you send it to Grant, and then let him review it, and he can forward out to the board members. Then if we make comments on it, we'll give the comments back to Grant, and he can put it on the Rosetta website for the community. Okay?
That works. The other items?
Too much fire.
What's for the other one?
So the other items that we had under the aquatics update was under tab number 1, you have the Greyhawk Landing West addendum. That's for the additional ponds that we just accepted conveyance of from Richard Rogers. As you can see on page 6.
We don't have any of those on here.
How do we get to?
The only one we have is
The regular meeting agenda.
There's two.
Yeah, I know. How do we get to the one we're working on?
Oh, I got it.
Oh, okay, up
There
at the
we go.
top.
I got it. I got it.
Okay.
Tony? If you, well, you're not.
The tab at the top.
Tab one.
Okay. Tab one.
There are two agendas on there.
Yep.
So the first item under tab number 1 is the Greyhawk Landing West contract addendum from Aquagenics. On page 6 of the agenda, you can see the additional ponds that are going to be added.
I make a motion that we incorporate this agenda unless Andy has any.
And I reviewed the addendum. I mean, it's pretty straightforward and simple. I don't have any objections.
So that's a motion from Jeff, a second from Ollie. All in favor of that motion, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Next up, board members, under tab number 2, you have a number of pepper tree removal quotes. John, I don't know if you wanted to speak to any of these in any of these locations. They're labeled A and B. Sections A and B are 2,500, C and D are 4,800, and section E is 4,800 as well.
Yes, we did a previous, right on the entrance here, we went north.
We went north along the main boulevard with a forestry harvester and eradicated the Brazilian pepper, which is a #1 Class A invasive species in Florida. Not only do we cut and get rid of, but we also treat the stump with an approved aquatic herbicide to prevent regrowth. I think that everything came out quite well, and I think people were happy with the previous work that we had done. That was kind of the prototype of what we'd like to go into and further to get rid of the invasive vegetation.
Okay. Mike, any comments?
No, where we need to take out the pepper trees one, you're never going to get them all out of here. I mean, where they're not causing a problem or whatever, I mean, it would be really expensive to get rid of all of them, and some of them will come back. I think it's just, a spot by spot where we need to do it. That's what we should do. So far, especially with the new machine that Aquagenics has, I'm real impressed by that machine. And then they come in and the stumps or whatever, they paint them so they don't grow back. But I don't think that we should be taking out every pepper tree. We don't have that kind of money.
Well, what, we have four.
There's three quotes in here. There's sections A and B, which is 2,500. Section C and D, 4,800, and section E is 4,800. So total is $12,100 if you did all three.
Any thoughts, Rick?
That's really your call.
But, in terms of the ones that are selected, are they in the locations that?
Permit you're supposed to control, and so it's really your call.
I don't remember off the top of my head, how much did we allocate last month, or in the last 2 months, for Brazilian pepper tree removal? You remember off the top of your head?
I can look back up. The last one we did was over $4,000 for the area over by the rec center.
And this is another 12,000? 12,100.
Correct. If you did all three.
The reason I broke them down was because to try to maybe potentially do them in stages, so we didn't have to do them all at one time. So we would do, section A, section B, section C, and so on and so forth. That's why I broke them down. So you wouldn't have to just go, you wouldn't be forced to have to do them all at one time. You can do them in sections as we go.
Okay.
They are in relatively critical areas as far as on the north entrance or the back entrance by that swale, on that part that goes underneath the roadway there, things of that sort. I just picked these, walking the site with Ed. We chose the locations that were the heaviest and most dense areas.
So could
when you do the work, does anyone from the organization here, Ed or anybody, monitor what you do, or just observe it to make sure that it's minimalist in what we do?
Yes. Yeah, we
okay.
communicate with them when we're on site, and we communicate with them when we're finished with the project, and then whatever may feel that may need to be dressed up or anything of that sort. People will
All right, thank you.
So I'd like to make a motion that we approve this expense over a 3-month period. Does that timetable make sense?
Or
actually,
in 5 phases?
we probably would want to do maybe a bit now, but once we get into rainy season, we probably don't want a 7,000 to 8,000 pound machine kind of bouncing around.
Okay.
Or you could wait till the end of your fiscal year after the rainy season, after the summer. You may do one now and then save your other 2 to see where you are financially come to the end of the fiscal year.
I'd rather we not let a $2,500 job become a $4,800 job by waiting.
No, there's 3 different quotes. There's one for 25.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So I don't want that small one to become a big one when we finally get around to it in November.
So do that one now.
That's right.
Just I would say, Jeff, we want to do it before the rainy season, because the more we cut down now and stop the growth,
the less there's to grow.
We'll see in the long run.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, we probably got about, give or take, depending on Mother Nature, 6 weeks before the rainy season.
So you're talking sections A and B? on here to do now.
To do now, and then do C, D, and then E in the time frame that makes sense relative to the weather. But not wait till November to do E, for example. So we'll leave that to Ed to.
You do it over 3 months, it's still going to be in this budget,
That's correct.
So that was a motion from Jeff to approve starting now, section A and B, and then going forward in the time forward, we will complete section C and D and E as the vendor recommends. That was a motion from Jeff, a second from Denny. All in favor of that motion, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carried.
Landscaping
Let's just keep in mind, we do not have to take out all these pepper trees, and they actually don't look bad. They're just not a native plant, and they do take over everything. So, but we don't have to take everything out.
Thank you. The next under tab 3, board members, this is something that was approved under the authorization of staff and the chair. It was just for the additional 2 structures. It's just a ratification process. It was $450 for the additional 2 structures. It can be seen on page 40 and 41. As mentioned, this work's already been performed. This is just simply a ratification process. So is there a motion on the table to ratify the outfall clearing proposal in the amount of $450? We had a motion from Denny, a second from Ollie. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Next up, we have the landscape update, and under tab 4, you actually have your Brightview Quality Site Assessment Report. Please let me know if you have any comments or questions in regards to page 43 in regards to the Quality Site Assessment Report. Tabs 5A, 5B, and 5C, we have additional irrigation quotes as well that I will review with each of you as well. Starting on tab number 5, this is where we discussed we were going to revisit the quotes for the irrigation along the boulevard.
Yeah, mine is.
So you have a number of irrigation proposals starting with tab number 5. Under tab number 5A, starting on page 47, board members, if you scroll down to page 47, I'll review them in order with you. This is for each of these proposals has the actual work order up front, as well as they indicate pictures behind it with a description as to what the location in which the work will take place. So the first is for Mulberry at the Rec Center. That is $3,200 plus an optional $500 for any additional head that we would like to approve.
And this is all around the playground out here?
Correct. The next is Dogwood and Mulberry on page 48, which is not to exceed $1,800, with a diagram behind on page 49. On page 50, you have the diamond on Mulberry East, which is a $2,900 not to exceed amount. And you have a diamond on the Mulberry West End for $2,100 not to exceed. Page 54, Mulberry and Dogwood East is for $950. Diagram on page 55. And the final is for the island at Greyhawk Boulevard in Kite Place is $2,650. If you were to approve all of these right now, it would be $13,600. And if you want to do any additional heads for around the playground, it's $500 additional per head. So you're saying for the 32, yeah, so if we did that, you could pull the $3,200 out of that 13,600, excuse me. $1,400, correct.
That's anybody?
Well, if this is going to be part of...
Yeah, that's my question. The question is this the tip of an irrigation iceberg within the community? Because there are large parts of Greyhound Boulevard that are not irrigated. Only the monument.
But it is irrigated from the main gate all the way to the restaurant.
That's correct.
And we would like to have, I believe,
So,
many of the residents in here would like to irrigate from Mulberry all the way to this restaurant. Enough irrigation so that we don't run into the kinds of issues that we have run into in the complaint.
But that stretch of road is exactly the same as the stretch of road from the rec center to the back gate. Okay, and that's probably twice as long, maybe 3 times as long as this stretch of road. So if we start down this path, where does it bring us? That's my question.
Why would not we consider them each individual request or need on an individual basis and not look at everything in one 12
Because
that's all circumstance. I mean, it could affect things and it could not.
the history of this is that this question has been raised since people started living in houses beyond the rec center. And having, so that stretch of road, it doesn't go all the way from the front gate to the rec center. Because there are huge parts of Greyhound Boulevard, right along the road, between the road and the sidewalk, that look horrible when there's no rain, and they look fine when there is rain. So they're not irrigated. So it's not that simple. It's not, so the residents of the community have been told for more than a decade, getting close to 15 years, that it was too expensive to irrigate the entire community. And, or at least the common areas of the community. So you've got corner lots, again, they look horrible when there's no rain, and they look lush when there is rain. So my question is, before we start down this path, and we have 10 times this number of people coming in here saying, what about me? What about my part of the community? I want to make sure we know what the answer is before it happens, rather than that we then get embroiled. Because I know most of you folks are from Greyhound West, because the community is evolving. The older part of the community, people have been, there were horrible fights, fist fights even, at these board meetings, back in the 04, 05, 06 time, because there was so much contention about what we were going to do and what we were not going to do. And we're here again because there's a new part of the community, and the community is growing. So the things that we didn't do, and I'm not saying we, because I wasn't on the board then. I was in the audience. And I got frustrated enough, and that's where. Yeah, that'll teach me. Well, the board, the CDD, was controlled by the developer, by the Sam Rogers Corporation. And only when a certain percentage of the homes were sold that the residents then became responsible for the community. And that's where we are now. Now, there's only one CDD, even though there's 2 POAs. So the community is expanding by about 50%. by the operation of railroad.
Yeah.
And let me finish, Mike. And so before we invest, we got to know what our end game is. But one more thing, and then I'll stop. Is one of the commitments that hopefully each of the board members have made is that they represent the community as a whole. And all of the issues, not just the ones that appeal to them and their friends, or their section of the community. And so there's a dangerous slope that you find yourself on if only the thing that you're interested in is what you want to accomplish when you get on the board. Because these things are going to come at you like crazy from all over the place. And then Kenneth Tefla, he's really the newest member of the board. That there are issues that he would rather not have to do because they don't affect him. Because he's in Grey Oak West. But we have to deal with the entire community and all of its issues. And within the scope of a budget that most of the members of the communities, by their silence, say, don't raise my CDD fees. Manage the budget so that I don't have to pay anymore. And we haven't had that happen for the last 6 or 7 years. Until the cows come back. All right, so back to the specific thing. You're making a motion.
I would make a motion to spend the money.
Can I speak that?
What?
Can I speak?
Once, let Denny make the motion first, then we can discuss
Okay,
its
fine.
merits.
First of all, I see my position here as representing the community as a whole, not just Grey Hawk West because I live here. So I'll take exception to anybody who says it. All right? Now, I've had other people in the community ask for certain things, which I said, fine. They wanted a fence in back of Lavender Loop to basically block off everything that's going on up in Raven's Crest over there. And I had no compunction voting on that. With this here, if there are residents in the community, and I don't mean Grey Hawk West solely, I mean, I'll include all of Grey Hawk, that need or have a need for an issue, I think it's incumbent on this board to look at every issue individually and make a decision individually. And that's for anything that goes on. So my motion would be, yes, I would approve. I don't believe, and I don't know why we would want to do a lot of irrigation out in a playground area where it's full of muck and have it wet for the children to play. That doesn't make much sense to me. If it was essential, I would say then you obviously should do it. As far as going along Mulberry is concerned, this is the primary thoroughfare in here, just like you have a primary thoroughfare in the Gray Harkeys. Okay? Now, I believe that there is irrigation quite a ways up there, and there is some irrigation here. If there was more irrigation needed out there, and somebody came to me and this board and said, we think it's needed, I would look at that with just as much open eyes as I'm looking at this. So my motion would be that we approve to do the expenditure out here, less the $3,200 out there. So that would be my motion.
$10,400.
$10,400.
That was a motion from...
I made the motion.
That was a motion from Denny authorizing $10,400 for the irrigation along Mulberry to be installed a second from Tony.
Okay, so before we vote, Mike has some comments.
Yeah, first of all, there's no irrigation past the circle at the rec center. So when you go past that, okay, it's all that the corner lots are all residential, like they are basically on Mulberry from the start to finish, okay? So if you do apples to apples, it's the whole of Mulberry, and then from the rec center up, okay? I agree 150% with Jeff and Ollie. We've looked at this for years, and I agree with Jeff that you have to be representing the whole community. And nobody on this board, and Denny knows it better than anybody, has stuck up for the whole community when we had the problem on Cara and where Denny lives. I stuck up for Greg Hawk West, okay, to not let them cut down the trees and everything. I do not think that's being done now. I think social communications are taken over from, there's no way, we killed this thing months ago, years ago, that we're not doing it, because then everybody is, look, you have Bahia planted there. You don't irrigate Bahia, okay? Now you've got 3 or 4 people that don't like the way the lots on the Mulberry look. Well, you know what? There's more lots. It's twice as big over in Gray Hawk Landing. We don't want to do this. We looked at the prices. This is a waste of money. It's Bahia. What do you want to do? Put St. Augustine in? Or all along there to irrigate that? No, we don't want to do that. That's why we planted very little St. Augustine when I negotiated with Richard Rogers. We didn't put trees along the boulevard, so we didn't lift up 10 years from now, have to pay for sidewalks, okay? And we planted Bahia so you don't have to irrigate it. As Jeff says, when it rains, it'll be green. We do need to spray for weeds and stuff like that. Then when we get the rainy season, it's all green, you know. So there's no reason this should even be coming to a vote again. We've done this. We've gone through this. And if you guys get it, why shouldn't we get it over here? There's no need to get it. This is what the boulevard is. The boulevard looks beautiful. We spray for the weeds, and in a month, everything will be green.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else?
Any further discussion before we continue the vote?
Governor Chris left office, he signed into legislation a bill that took precedent over the homeowners associations about planting specific types of grass or plants. And his bill basically said you plant Florida green. And the primary reason for that was to cut down on the amount of water that's wasted on irrigation throughout the state. And so I know that Great Hawk East had some issues with that because when they would go out and tell residents they needed to replant their St. Augustine, as soon as it was brought to their attention, it says, oh, no, you don't need to plant St. Augustine anymore, you can plant Bahia. They agreed with that and went with it. So the question is, do we want to abide with what the state says? And I can understand why the boulevard from the gate up to the circle was planned the way it is and irrigated, because the developer wanted that to look nice as a primary entrance into the community when he was selling houses beginning in 2000. That's curb appeal. Now, we have curb appeal when it comes up to this at a certain point. And residents along the boulevard here, Mulberry, have said, well, I don't like it because there's weeds there and the weeds come into my lawn. Well, I get weeds from everywhere on this community, weeds come into my yard. And I deal with it. And so I guess the question is, do we go and do we spend the money? Do we continue to irrigate? Or do we go and say, hey, we understand for a certain amount of months of the year, it may not look as nice as it should. But we know in the end that we are abiding by, if you want to say, what was put into effect by Governor Chris when he was here. To say, hey, save your water. Because it's just going down, you won't even make it to the opera filters. Because most of the time, the worst thing you can do is to spray your lawn for 10 or 15 minutes and then let it go because all the roots stay alive. And then it dies. That's what I ask.
Okay. I have a question for Ed or maybe for Rick. But where would the water for this irrigation come from? Okay, so there's not a water expense.
Well, there's two different, Great Hawk West has gray water. We do not.
I understand, Mike.
Put an extra whatever.
I'm asking Rick the question, if that's okay. Okay. So our cost, there's no ongoing operating cost of any significance.
Yes.
Yeah, I understand. But more mowing, because it's more growing.
And we're dealing with this issue now, not future.
I understand. Okay. Ed, do you have any, or Grant, do you have any thoughts on this? Okay. Then I guess
We're back to, there was a motion on the table for approving the 10,400 and a second. All in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Anything else? The landscape update, board members, anything you want Brightview to address? Obviously, we'll get these signed proposals over to them after the meeting today, and I'll look to have this scheduled to start as soon as possible. The next item, board members, is the district engineer's report. Rick Shopaker is present this evening to give the report as well.
The first item under mine is the FDOT and State Road 64. Unfortunately, I was not at the meeting over at the Bayside. I had the conflict, so I think some of you guys were there, so I didn't know if you wanted to start that.
I was there, and Steve Otley was there, and when I did hear Walter speak, in my opinion, I think that FDOT has made up its mind. I think that it's just like, almost negligible that they will do anything different other than put a roundabout there. I do like what the investigation that Walter did relative to the ADS. That might be something, because I don't know how people who fill or fit the bill for American disabilities, how are they going to get across there? They're not, and there's no crosswalks or anything. So a light would have a crosswalk.
I didn't attend that particularly, but I did attend a meeting 18 months ago when the topic was the Dry Road interchange. And the FDOT was dead set against these lights, even though they're putting a temporary one in now. Their preferred solution based on federal feedback and federal analysis were the roundabouts. They were safer, But they were although they were more expensive documents, but there were fewer deaths, was the study's conclusion over a lengthy period of time. And that's why state of Florida has become roundabout rated.
Excuse me, what is the operating issue for roundabout? There's no light there.
There's no light. There are lanes that go around. It's a rotary. And so it's a four-way intersection at Rye Road and White Eagle and 64, and there will be a giant circle in the middle. And there'll be lanes that go around that circle in both directions. And God help us if any of these orange trucks don't slow down enough to make the turn. But anyway, but to Walter, that's what they're doing with respect to Mill Creek, Lorraine, our intersection, Grand Boulevard and Polk Road in 64, what they'll do at 117th Street intersection, they will follow their program.
We can shoot it down.
We can, but we can't. We can as citizens and individuals, but communities have no say. They do not listen to communities.
There are things that we can use against them because they're going by federal guidelines and they have to. And if you spend the time, and I spend at least 20 to 30 hours just reading the federal guidelines, there are a slew of issues that we can hit them on. Like one thing mentioned.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're not going to do this here. If there's enough momentum for the citizenry to try to address this with the FDOT. Because I'm pretty sure at that meeting, they didn't want to listen to anybody. They were there to tell, right? Here's our program. Because that's exactly what they did. They said it's open house, it's fact finding, but no, for the right road. It was come, listen, drink the Kool-Aid, be quiet, and here comes the program. Now the program is bigger because the whole corridor has been evaluated. And so when we talked to the FDOT 6 weeks ago about the change in the exits from the community and from Polk Road, we went there to talk. No, they went there to tell us what they were about to do, and they did it within about a 10-day period. So the FDOT has a way of listening, but it isn't the one we want it to be. So I don't know what to do. I'm not going to be able to.
We had them in here over a year ago, and they made a presentation on what they were going to do, and none of that has changed. Not one bit, through all the comments and all the meetings that we've had, not one bit of it has changed from a roundabout.
All the end community traffic?
Nothing.
Not
I think
any
the only thing that
accidents,
changed might
not
be
any,
the light at Lorraine, the temporary light at Lorraine. That might be the
because
only.
they're behind schedule on the roundabout.
Jeff,
Yes.
Ollie and I worked on this problem separately for like 4 years. We had Rick Stubbe in here when he was our representative, and he was in charge of the DOT. He was like the chairman of the DOT up in Tallahassee. So we did everything we could possibly do, between Ollie working on it, myself working on it, everything. They don't want to hear anything. So, it's not like we haven't tried for a long time. At the beginning, our developer said that, oh, yeah, we're going to try and get a light. They never did anything. Some of us tried. The best
for the county was there, lady, and I forgot her name. And what she indicated, because it was brought up that the developer, in fact, I brought it up when I spoke, that the developer had given money to the traffic light, and that was turned over to the county. When I talked to the commissioner afterwards, she said, the county still had the money, although it's in the general fund, it's still marked. They went to the state, FDOT, and were willing to put the traffic light up, and because it's a state road, they said absolutely none. Now, what she also
That's what I said before. Money isn't the issue. I'm sorry, Walter.
Between the two developers, they should have some influence.
They don't.
Okay, the other thing was that there's an election coming up in March. And I believe that our state representative is one of the individuals that are going to be on there. We can find out who that individual is and possibly bring him in here and have a town hall meeting and say, hey, we're a community. Right now, we have probably, we'll round it off, 800 houses over there completed. There's probably at least 300 houses probably in here. So we got a voting community of probably close to 3,000 people. That makes a big difference within any of these local elections.
When's the elections next?
It's in November.
November.
Okay,
You said
general
March. You said March. I was thinking it was, you said an election in March.
If I said March,
March is very fast, okay.
No, but for the general election, to try to bring them in, said these are issues. But we also have to remember that the individual running for office is also a politician. And a politician, the only thing they want to do is to get in office. And so any promises made aren't necessarily promises kept.
And just for the record, you have 1,140 lots. Correct.
One thing I want to point out, which I think has already been expressed here this evening, is that the board, as a board, can only do so much. We can write a letter, we can express a position, but you really can't expend, your powers under Chapter 190 are constrained as a special district. And we can do some of the things we've done to try and assist the community, but we can't, go all out and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or something along those lines. Not to mention that, as we've also heard, I think that there's strength in numbers, so I think that the upswell needs to come from the residents and the citizenry. And as Ollie said, those are all the votes as well.
Just so you know, we as a people are already taking action on this. I already contacted ABC News and told them we believe that there's fraud going on in the FDOT, that people are being paid off. They're providing for $1 million for the design of the roundabouts. The roundabouts are a standard thing. That $1 million is slush money that somebody's getting. There's fraud going on. And if you ask the question properly, and you shoot down the study, and I already have all the ammunition to shoot down the 2-year-old study before Cole opened up the YU or opened up thousands of homes in Lakewood Ranch coming into this intersection, is hitting us. There's so many homes, and you never asked the right question. You never asked to have a pedestrian crossing for ADA, American Disability.
That will not help our intersection.
You can't get around Constitution that way.
Because of Rye Road. That ship sailed several years ago. But I'm not trying to discourage you. Just be careful what it is that you throw at, what you throw at things. Because you want to be credible.
Okay, credible, this is numbers from them. In 2018, they said there were only 5 accidents in the first 6 weeks. That translates into 43 for 2018.
That's
and there have been accidents since then.
Okay, Walter, I'm sorry to do this to you again, so we need to move on. We're trying to share what it is that was shared with people related to this power. Whether there's action to be taken, possible.
Let's get back to Rick's report. We're still under your report. Rick, anything else other than the State Route 64 topic you had for the board today?
Yeah, I think at this time we should probably bring up the plat for phase
Correct. That's what's under my report, the conveyance of additional infrastructure. That's something that for Dean to discuss, so.
The plat, I reviewed it as far as for what I could see, and I made some comments. I got with Dean, and then he responded back. So I think that's where we're at right now. Is they would like for the plat to be signed off so they could start to selling the lots that's out there.
I've seen it, and I've
No, it isn't. It's not on the agenda.
I mean, that's something that I got sent. You're correct. It didn't make the agenda. It didn't have a tabbed item. It's not on the agenda, correct? Because I received it this week. It's something that I did look at. It's not something that I know Rick has been able to review it, and I've seen it as well, but Andy hasn't seen it either. Go ahead, Dean.
May I take a second? Dean Paquette with Kimley Horn. I've been in front of this board several times before. I'm not asking the plat to be signed tonight. We are in process with the county, but we are expecting to be at a position where within the next few weeks they'll be ready for the Mylars, which is when we actually, ask for signatures. The plat is consistent with previous plats. With the exception that the county has changed some rules regarding how wetlands are treated on a plat. Apparently there's no more conservation easements. Now they just designate wetlands as wetlands. So there was something that happened. So anyway, we've worked that out with the county. We have gone through 2 reviews, or at least 2 cycles with the county related to comments. So we're at a point right now where we're basically just waiting for a final couple of items. I've been here before, and what I'm just asking tonight is that I can have the ability to coordinate with the appropriate people to sign the plat when it's ready, and also when staff is okay with that. So.
Educated and next, have it on the agenda.
Correct. I'll place it on the agenda for next month, and I can place it under Rick's report. So.
I have a question that's sort of related. It has to do with 117th Street. Looks like 117th Street just ends at the cul-de-sac for the latest lots that are being put out there. Is it going to be a barrier there? Is it going to stop? Does anybody know if once you guys going north? Going north.
Yeah, going north on 117th, they will be, they're going to put the markers up, the end of road markers. I mean, I can get with C&M. I'd rather not put a hardened barrier, because if someone goes through, worst case, they hit a sign. If I put a barrier, then it's the opposite case. They'll hit a barrier. So, but it is, the termination of 117th was a hot topic a long time ago. It is at the current point right now that was approved by the county. So the county wanted 117 to make the first connection to 4th Avenue.
The other development on the left there, I can't remember the name of it. You can turn into that other development, correct?
Yes.
But it ends, but there's no entrance at the end of that road into gravel.
At the end of 117th? No. That is just a through street. At one time it was designed that way, but right now the cul-de-sac just ends. And what there will be is a pedestrian access into Gates Creek. Yeah. From the cul-de-sac. Correct.
In earlier plans, there were some adjustments made in the lot sizes and the housing density. Is there anything changed?
No, this section is accordance with the previously approved size. There's no additional or reduced lots. It's in a section that hasn't changed since the beginning. So just real quick, related to timing, because of how it takes to get on Board of County Commissioners meeting, I guess I would just ask that if it is worked out between now and the next meeting, that it can be that the timing works out that way, that we can just ratify the signatures at that point versus having to wait to the next meeting, because
It's May 24th, so.
Well, for me, before the 24th, then my recommendation, if the board was so inclined, would be to authorize the chair to execute it subject to staff approval rather than ratifying it later, if you're comfortable with it.
which has been done before.
We're into,
Comfortable with that as well. I'll review it as well.
We can't poll board.
no, as part of the staff recommendation.
We distribute it to the board if you have any comments.
I can do that.
I would recommend what he said too about getting staff to review and then getting you to sign off, because on the next meeting on the 24th, I'm going to be out of town.
So is there a motion on the table to authorize signature outside the meeting contingent upon staff's review?
To be clear, I think that perhaps, if I could, the motion would be to authorize the district to accept the dedication to the CDD on the Greyhawk Landing West Phase 5D plat, and authorize the chairman to execute subject to staff approval.
Yes.
That was a motion from Ollie. A second from Tony. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Back to Rick, your report.
Just a couple minor things. The striping, the vendor promised me he would be out here the week of April the 10th, and I just drove through and I noticed it's not done, so let me follow up with him. And then for Ed, I'm trying to work with the vendor for the repairs at ponds 47 and 50. We have not paid for that. He's tried it twice, it's failed. So, but again, we're not going to authorize the payment till it's fixed. And then there's some sidewalk grinding that Ed mentioned to me that there's a few extra locations out there. But also, I did not review your nature trails, and I understand there's some raised sidewalks in there, so I'll incorporate that with my next round. And that's all I had.
Anything else for Rick at this time, board members?
No, just go back to tab 5, there was,
Bring that up under Ed's report. The mulch proposals, we're going to talk about that under Ed's. Thank you, Rick. Next up, we have District Council.
Thanks. Regarding the agenda item about cellular update, in Lakewood Ranch, we're continuing to move forward with that project. We've had, as recently as yesterday, we had a meeting with the proposed provider, USA CRAN Group. The point that we're at now is we're negotiating a memorandum of understanding as well as a resultant license agreement that will be utilized for the work that they'll do in our easement areas. Where we're at is that USA is trying to get at least 2 providers on board to make their project worthwhile. They have, of the 4 major providers out there for cellular communications, they have 1, and they're close to potentially getting a second. And once they do, it will make financial sense for them to move forward. If they're able to pick up the other 2, which they hope that they will, it will simply be even more lucrative for them. So that's the point that we're at. We're still moving forward in the right direction. We're currently negotiating with them what the drop dead date will be. They can't make us any promises, but on the other hand, we're going to reach a point where we're going to say, okay, you guys have had enough time, we're going to move on to somebody else. So we're in the midst of negotiating the timeline with them. So that's that item. With regards to state alarm contract, Grant was finally able to get proposed contract agreement out of them. I took a look at it, gave them my revisions. We haven't heard back yet, so the ball is in their court at the moment on the contract documents. With regards to the privacy guards, the alert presented us, or Allied Universal, presented us with a contract addendum to switch over to their new corporate entity. That needs some work, so we are going to prepare our own addendum. But in regards to the question that was brought up earlier, we are operating under an old agreement that is on a month-to-month, as I recall, at the moment. So the question is whether you want to continue that way, and we'll do the addendum to make sure that we track the correct new corporate entity. We could potentially go for a new agreement, although I think we've had those discussions in the past. So.
And I think our conclusion was that we did want to.
You want to go for a new contract, same provider? I mean, it's same okay.
Yeah, with the, you know,
We've been working on, in the direction of an addendum, but now that we have direction, we'll get a new contract from them, Grant.
I just want to bring up, since we're on that topic, the question of the scope of this contract. So we defined the service level.
We have,
Allied Universal.
if I could, I'll try and address that. The way that we had it structured in the past, and doesn't mean we have to do it moving forward, but the way we had it structured in the past was we had a contract with them which outlined what I'll call the legalese in terms of what their payment is, termination rights, things along those lines. And then we had an associated document that went with it, and it refers to it, for what we call the post orders, which says, thou shalt let everybody in, this is what you'll do when you need to use the restroom, things along those lines. And that was what was referred to before, is those post orders and whether they are or are not being properly followed.
So there's two parts to that.
Yes.
One is there's a postal orders that say to do these things. If they need to be followed. There's a second question of, do we change those post orders to have the guard do something different than what we told them to do in the past? We have discussed this, and we have no appetite as a group to change our expectations of what the guards are supposed to do. Now, whether they do that or not, that's a thing we have to manage. But we have discussed this, and we have proposed not to expand the cost of the guard service and have the service level or the things changed to include interrogating visitors. We have the ability, I understand,
Your orders say to collect information. Why are we paying them to do something you're not making them do?
And do we have cameras that can record the backs of cars as they come? Sure. So we have license plate information if we needed it. Okay. Just want to make sure.
Here's what, if I can make a suggestion, what we'll do is Grant and I will work to get a new contract for them as opposed to just an addendum with the new company. We'll present that to you, and when we do, we'll also have a copy of the post orders behind it so that you can have an opportunity to review them again, if you'd like.
And then we will have to discuss. I have them now. I can send it to you.
Yeah.
Rigorous enforcement.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Since we legally can't stop anyone from coming through the gate, does that restrict the degree to which we can interrogate?
Well, no, and it's a good question because, there really is no, as we've talked about before, and I've talked about in a lot of my districts, there, fortunately or unfortunately, is not any case law or attorney general opinion directly on point. What we do know, because it's IRS regulation, and as we've discussed, the last thing we want is the IRS here. What we do know is we cannot deny entry. We can control entry. So, can we ask them, what's your name and where are you going? I think that even though there's no law on it, I think that is probably allowable, okay? Can, I'm going to be wild here, can we do a strip search or something like that? Probably not, Correct. If they say I'm Mickey Mouse and I'm not telling you where I'm going, we still have to let them in. Yes.
The problem, I think, initially, causing the big problem is we were told bill of sale. This is a gated community, when in fact it's not.
Well, it is. I mean, we can control access, but we can't deny access.
Also not open the gate for everyone who drives through it as soon as they pull up.
Control meaning that we can ask one or two questions. We can have a gate there. We can have someone trot out and say, hi, how are you? What is your name? So we're controlling, but we can't deny.
But we got a keypad.
Yes, we do. So if somebody, if the gate, right.
Is there a written ledger kept of the license plates that go through?
It says there is. It says you have
Your orders say there
access
should be.
control form that residents' name and vehicle information.
That's what your orders say.
That's what it currently says.
If they say, I don't have it in front of me, but I don't doubt it. Yeah, I don't doubt it.
They're from 2005.
That's
The
our
proposal was from 2005.
So we're going to rip this open and take a look?
Yeah.
Is this an opportunity for us to go out and get perhaps other bids for security?
Yes.
Well, we've talked about it before, and yes, you have that ability. And let me also add that this is not a contract that is subject to formal RFP process, like if we're a landscape provider in excess of $195,000. Security is not one of those. So at any time, you do have the ability to solicit other companies if you want. I know Grant brought at least one other company forward before. So it's not, you have that choice.
One that's like Heritage Harbor, and with Allied, and they, you have like talks where they get, hi, here's so-and-so, but then Allied also patrol the neighborhood. They do a little of both.
They got my suggestion, and my thoughts, at least on this, are that we go look and see what other companies may be out there. I mean, obviously, you're involved in a number of other communities. You're involved in many other communities. I'm sure you can come back with a recommendation of at least one or two more so that we could go with 3 RFPs. If it, and we don't need an RFP, but 3 bids for the same service and then put in post orders for whichever company. I mean, I've been into Heritage Harbor, and I have to show an ID when I go through that gate.
Well, don't we have a post order to get this information?
Yes, it is, because it's not ours.
I think one of the things that we're overlooking here is that we can have a number of security companies come in. We can make the decision to go with them, but it's the same thing. The post orders are there. It's the individual at the gate, whether they're going to enforce it or not. And you have to remember, these guys aren't paid very much, and it's the same work pool that they pull from every company that's around.
I mean, we have, for instance, at Lakewood Ranch that I'm familiar with, they actually do a random check of the people and grade them and make sure that they are complying with what the post orders are.
Andy?
Yeah.
Andy?
Yes.
Heritage Harbor, up until a month or two ago, had a kiosk. They had no identification. River Strand is something else, but Stony Brook at Heritage Harbor had the kiosk.
Yeah, I represent them. I understand.
Or they're in the process of throwing them out.
Well, they have in Vera. There's been no decisions about what they're going to do with them.
And I don't think it's a bad service, but it wasn't good enough to keep them.
Well, I have a number of, and I'm not advocating for them, but I have a number of communities that are happy with an Envira type system where it's just a stick that you talk to. A lot of my communities want the personal touch, and
But those communities have the formal gated.
no, they have something similar to what you have. CDD owned public roadways.
But they are preventing access.
If you have the Envira stick sitting there, no, they have direction. They have to let people in, no matter what, just like we would tell a live guard sitting there. They have the same direction. They have the same post orders that says you cannot deny access.
But they do deny access to Heritage with the kiosk. If you're not on a person's list,
They're not supposed to. And we've had many discussions there about that. I'm not doubting you, Mike. I mean, it may be happening, but when it does, we provide immediate feedback to whomever. Like I said, I'm not advocating for Envira. There's 20 different companies out there probably. But they...
And we have had other quotes in the last, I guess, 6 or 8 years with other companies, whatever, and we haven't even come close to the prices we get.
But so I guess the question...
Not a good idea to go out and get some other quotes, but, you only have so much money to spend, and if you put it out for a vote to the community, you will find out that if you go up, a certain amount of money, they're not going to vote for it.
Well, so I think that the direction that maybe Grant...
Negotiate with these guys, if we need a few more services to do it, on the railway do a very good job.
Thanks, Mike. I think that what Grant and I need in terms of direction is, do you want to bring back some quotes, or do you want to bring back a contract with Allied Universal for your review?
I think it's time that we looked at other vendors.
Well, I think probably definitely want additional quotes. You can work on the contract because we may be relegated to deal with that anyway, and that piece is done.
Well, so in that regard, then I would say that they will certainly invite them to quote. But before I spent your time and money working up a contract with them, you might decide that you'd rather go with ABC Company. I mean.
Can we rip out the key bins? Because that's the hub of this thing.
You can,
Key bins are there.
if you have somebody there 24/7, then you can. But if somebody is not at that gate, there needs to be a way to get in.
Emergency management, you can provide those codes to the dispatch.
I'm not talking, excuse me. Emergency management, fire, rescue, they have a siren, it pops open the gate. That's not what I'm discussing. I'm talking about your general public needs to have the ability to get through that gate, whether it's through 24/7 manned access, or if you don't have somebody there 24/7, then you need to have either the keypad or some way for them to get in.
Because we have 2 key bins. And both of them are vigorously used because, I don't know, people maybe don't have a transponder. They don't want to pay the money to replace one before. So if we pull those out, then they have to.
You need to have somebody there, or they would use a transponder. Right.
Okay.
But there's not always someone there who's driving around.
Well, but that's the thing, is we can define the service level we want. So if we want somebody there 24/7, 365 and a quarter, then that's what we have to pay for.
But I think it's also listening to some of the complaints that have come in about the lack of oversight, put it at that, of the current guards that are down there, is to run a test, go through and see what they do.
Yeah.
And if they aren't up to the level that supposed to meet with what our contractor says, then they need to go.
Well, at this point, what we'll do is Grant will gather, I don't want to speak for Grant, but Grant will gather proposals from security providers, and we'll bring them to the board, and you'll see their hourly rate is, make it up $5 an hour, and you'll decide, do you want them 24/7 or only 18 hours with a keypad or whatever.
Because Jerry had given us basically the rate sheet. And it really comes down to, how many hours of what level of person. Not so much what they do, it's just how long they're here.
And then you'll make a decision which provider you want, and we'll work towards negotiating a contract with them.
But to follow up on what Ollie said, would it be possible, Grant, you and Ed to work up a test and maybe get, we can participate in it under your direction to, what do we do, what steps do we take, one of the things we got to figure out a way as a community to stop happening is people berating the guards, yelling at them, and carrying on like uncivilized people. And that happens regularly. So that's got to stop. Okay? No matter how frustrated you might be, and I'm not talking to you because I'm not blaming any of you, but pass it on. We gotta act like civilized people if we expect them to be responsive.
But we as a community also have to remember the pool for these individuals is one pool.
Yep.
The word spreads very quickly that that's a hostile community, and individuals say, I don't want to work in Greyhawk because of the attitude and the manner in which they're treated.
And then also, you have to remember the other two, they were saying that a child.
That's law enforcement.
But that's why maybe we should just use the automated machine if they can't really do anything and they're paying so much money.
And I will, and
Don't even try, okay?
I want to correct one thing.
Audience participation was over a long time ago. Let's get on with the meeting.
And I'll gather multiple quotes from multiple vendors, and I'll give you guys options on your next agenda to review.
Unless there's any questions, those are the only items I have.
Next up is the field manager report. Under tab 5C, though, you have, starting on page 58, board members 58, 59, and 60. You have 3 big earth mulch proposals that I'll let Ed speak to prior to his report.
Mulches